indigents.
It's all four.
So due to Indigenous people living in rural areas, and they have a lack of resources, and so this is terrible because they have less. Oh, hold on one second. Okay, sorry. Because Indigenous Australians live in rural areas, they lack in resources such as like schools and medical centres and things like that. So they're usually less educated, and they're less likely to go and visit a doctor if something goes wrong. And you know, by this stage, you know, things like with their, like having liver problems, it gets worse, and they don't know. They just leave it until it gets untreatable. So one of these untreatable diseases is liver cancer, and it's one of the many fatal diseases that Indigenous people go through, and it's caused the most deaths due to alcohol and drug consumption. Indigenous Australians have had 40% lower chance of surviving liver cancers than non-Indigenous Australians due to alcohol consumption, and Indigenous Australians are 3 times more likely to develop liver cancer than non-Indigenous Australians. So now so diseases of the liver, such as, I think that's pronounced cirrhosis, thank you very much, were ranked the 9th leading cause of death to the Indigenous Australians. High levels of the main enzyme in the liver is called ALT in our blood, and it means that we have liver disease or some form of liver damage. 16.5% of the Indigenous Australians recorded to have had abnormal levels of ALT in their liver. So a lot of the higher rates were found in men than it were in women. Indigenous Australians were estimated 1.5 times as likely to have shown high ALT levels compared to non-Indigenous Australians after taking, and this is also after taking age difference into account. So I just want to quickly go over this particular graph here. Just shows the abnormal ALT levels in Indigenous Australians compared to non-Indigenous Australians. So this is, as you can see, the blue line here just shows the increase that Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders have ATL levels, abnormal ALT levels, compared to the non-Indigenous Australians. You can see there's a really big gap, like there's a huge increase. Okay, thank you very much.
So I'm Taylor, and I'll be talking about domestic violence, particularly in relation to drugs and alcohol. So the number of Australians who are affected by diseases caused by alcohol is double the amount of non-Indigenous Australians that are affected. There are many factors that can lead to domestic violence, including mental illness, arguments, escalating too far, and the abuse of drugs and alcohol. In particular, the Indigenous community drugs and alcohol seem to be one of the highest contributing factors to domestic violence. Okay, so how do drugs and alcohol lead to domestic violence? Well, I'm sure you all have an idea already, but we can just go over some more. The Aboriginal community are more susceptible to the use and abuse of drugs and alcohol, and unfortunately, these effects of these are reflected with the high rate of domestic violence within the community. This is because of generally being isolated in rural areas, and the easiest way of entertainment is drugs and alcohol. While many young Aboriginal people in particular have very high dropout rates of school, and while not being occupied at school or having any authority figures in proximity, drugs and alcohol become a big temptation. The harmful use of drugs and alcohol can lead their abusers to become violent, aggressive, confused, dependent on the substance, paranoid, and more often than not dysfunctional. Many of these factors are contributing causes to domestic violence. So some of the health implications that domestic violence leaves with their victims is including mental illnesses, homelessness, actually go through in running, you really have no idea what actually happens. Like, these are just some statistics that don't tell us what their injuries are or how they actually come by them. So just some statistics, Indigenous Australians are 5 times as likely to experience physical violence and 3 times as likely to experience sexual violence than non-Indigenous Australians, which I think is a ridiculous gap and is really, you have to question why that gap is there, of course. The life expectancy for males is 67 years and for females 72 years. Now, that's for the Indigenous population, and of course, non-Indigenous are a lot higher, and this the life expectancy here is also related to domestic violence, especially for the women. Thank you.
Hi, my name's Claire, and today I'll be talking to you about the effects of drugs and alcohol on the Indigenous community's mental health. Alright, so in a survey done in 2008, it involved 250,000 people, and the results came back showing that 156,000 people were affected by mental implications. 23.8% of those resulted in just low to moderate degrees of mental health, but 38.9% were very high. And this shows that it's 2.5 times higher than non-Indigenous community. This is a graph from the survey, and it shows that it's predominantly, mental health is predominantly a lot more found in the females and the males, especially in the ages between 45 and 54. Alright, so some of the disorders of mental health is like anxiety and depression, personality disorders and schizophrenia. 31%, so it's like the biggest majority, like the majority of them come up with depression and anxiety. There's also a lot of suicide and self-harm related to mental health in the non-Indigenous community. Over 14,000 out of 100,000 were admitted to hospital due to suicide or self-harm related cases, and that's two times more than the non-Indigenous community. Got a little video.
Indigenous suicide rates are at an all-time high, with children as young as 11 taking their own lives. During this Mental Health Week, Federal Labor pledged to cut those rates in half through a whole-of-community approach trialled in 12 locations around the country. In a moment, we'll speak to anti-suicide campaigner Jerry Georgiatis about what the government and opposition have in the pipeline. But first, Tara Callanan reports.
It's hard to fathom, but the statistics show that Aboriginal children aged under 14 are 8 times more likely to suicide than their non-Aboriginal counterparts. It's a harsh reality we are all too familiar with.
Most Indigenous people, because we do have extended families, we have had usually an experience of one of our members losing their lives to suicide.
Bardi woman Professor Pat Dudgeon says suicide is often the result of racism, intergenerational trauma and social problems in our communities.
So we know our health is very poor. We also know that we have high levels of incarceration, issues with housing, high unemployment and basically very entrenched poverty in a lot of our communities.
That's why she's working to empower our youth, raise awareness of mental health and instill a sense of hope. These Wiradjuri children from Wellington in central western New South Wales are part of a project working to create awareness around mental health through music. But Professor Dudgeon says there is a lack of culturally appropriate services available for Indigenous youth in regional and remote areas.
Some places don't even have any services, or they're open from 9 to 5. So if you want to bring about change or sort out a social problem, you have to work in genuine partnership and empower and be partners with the people you're working with.
Professor Dudgeon hopes to see more funding put back into Aboriginal prevention programs within the next 12 months. Tara Callanan, NITV News.
Indigenous.
Alright, before we play, I've got some organisations that are very much involved in trying to support and provide programs that will help lessen the huge amounts of people affected by drugs and alcohol in Indigenous community. First of all, I've got Lifeline. They're very much involved in the mental health side of the community. You can call them up anytime, and they'll, if you just need to talk to them straight away, they can counsel you through different issues you're having. They can also transfer you onto or refer you onto other services that can help you with that. Aboriginal alcohol and drug services very much involved in the Aboriginal side of the uses, and they put in programs that help prevent the further generations falling into the same cycles and traps of the effects of drugs and alcohol. And the Aboriginal Family Services and Support Family Services, it's also it brings the families together and just gives them a place that they can build up as a community, and they also provide help with the counselling of families that are going through issues. Let's play. Yeah, I'm trying to.
Just on the black screen, the other screen, the little screen. Yeah, so press on there to bring it up, and there should be volume.